Blue glow haunts me every single night. I wake up screaming, my skin burning with phantom pain, my lungs gasping for air that feels thick and poisonous. For 32 years, I've lived with inexplicable terror. My name is Cindy Bruster. I'm a 38-year-old accountant from Portland, Oregon, and I'm about to tell you how I discovered I died in the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in a life I never lived. Or so I thought. Let me start with the present, with the fears that controlled my life before I understood them. I've had these symptoms since I was 6 years old. My first panic attack happened in kindergarten. The teacher was showing us a picture book about community helpers, and when she got to the page about doctors and hospitals, something inside me just broke. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing. I felt like I was dying. They called my parents. The school nurse couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. That was just the beginning. By the time I was 8, my parents had taken me to 7 different doctors. Pediatricians, psychiatrists, neurologists. They ran every test you can imagine. Brain scans, blood work, allergy tests, psychiatric evaluations. Everything came back normal. Perfectly, frustratingly normal. One doctor suggested I was just seeking attention. Another said it was childhood anxiety, and I'd grow out of it. I didn't grow out of it. In middle school, our science teacher announced we'd be doing a unit on energy production. When she mentioned nuclear power, I had to run out of the classroom. I threw up in the hallway bathroom and couldn't stop shaking for an hour. My classmates thought I was weird. The counselor suggested homeschooling. My mother refused to give up on me, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She didn't understand what was wrong with her daughter. Neither did I. The physical symptoms were the worst part. I had chronic fatigue that no doctor could explain. Some days I could barely get out of bed. My skin was hypersensitive. Certain fabrics felt like they were burning me. I had this persistent metallic taste in my mouth that dentists insisted wasn't real. I went through 5 different toothpastes trying to get rid of it. Nothing worked. When I was 12, my school showed a documentary about the Cold War. There was a segment about nuclear weapons and nuclear accidents. I lasted exactly 3 minutes before I passed out, hit my head on the desk on the way down, got a concussion. The school called an ambulance. Being in that ambulance, hearing the sirens, smelling the disinfectant, I had the worst panic attack of my life. The paramedics thought I was having a seizure. High school was a nightmare of avoidance. I learned to identify my triggers and stay away from them. No hospitals, no medical dramas on TV, no science documentaries, nothing about Russia or the Soviet Union, nothing blue and glowing. I avoided the color blue entirely for years. My room was decorated in earth tones. My clothes were browns and greens and grays. Friends thought it was a fashion choice. It was survival. I managed to graduate high school. Barely. College was supposed to be a fresh start. I chose accounting because it felt safe. Numbers. Logic. Nothing that would trigger me. And it worked, mostly. I built a small, careful life. I found a job at a mid-sized firm. Made a few friends who didn't ask too many questions. Dated occasionally, though relationships were hard. How do you explain to someone that you can't watch certain movies or go to certain places without having a complete meltdown? By the time I turned 30, I'd accepted this was just who I was. Broken in ways medicine couldn't fix. Afraid of things that didn't make sense. I'd learned to manage my symptoms. I had my safe routines. My quiet life. It wasn't the life I dreamed of as a child, but it was livable. Then March 2023 happened. I was having coffee with my friend Sarah at our usual cafe on a rainy Portland afternoon. She was talking about her therapist, which wasn't unusual. Sarah was always trying some new wellness trend, but this time was different. I did past life regression, she said, stirring her latte. I know it sounds crazy, but Cindy, it actually helped. I laughed. Past lives? Really, Sarah? You know I don't believe in that stuff. I didn't either, she insisted. But I've been terrified of water my entire life. Couldn't swim, couldn't even take baths, had to be showers. And my therapist suggested we try regression just to see. And I remembered drowning in a past life. I was on a ship that sank. And once I understood where the fear came from, it started getting better. That's just your subconscious creating a story to explain your phobia, I said, the logical accountant in me dismissing it immediately. Maybe, Sarah shrugged, but I can take baths now. First time in 34 years. If it's just my subconscious making up stories, I don't care. It worked. I went home that day and tried to forget the conversation. But that night, I had the nightmare again. The one I'd been having since childhood. The one that never changed. I'm in a large room filled with panels and buttons and screens. Everything is shaking. Alarms are screaming at a pitch that makes my ears hurt. People are running and shouting in a language I shouldn't understand, but somehow do. And there's this light. This horrible, beautiful blue light that seems to pierce through everything. I can feel it, not just see it, feel it entering my body, burning me from the inside out. I can taste metal, so strong it makes me want to vomit. I'm dying, and I know it with absolute certainty. My cells are dying. My body is shutting down, and I can't stop it. I woke up at 3:47 a.m., drenched in sweat, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack. I lay there in the dark, thinking about what Sarah had said. What if there was an explanation? What if these fears, these symptoms, these nightmares, what if they came from somewhere? I made a decision. I would try the regression therapy. I was 36 years old. I'd lived with this terror for 3 decades. What did I have to lose except another sleepless night? Finding a therapist took 2 weeks. I wanted someone legitimate, not some new age charlatan. Dr. Elena Morrison came highly recommended. She had a PhD in psychology from Stanford, specialized in trauma therapy, and offered past life regression as one of several therapeutic approaches. Her office was in a quiet part of the city, professional and calm. Our first session was just talking. She wanted to understand my symptoms, my history, my triggers. I told her everything. The panic attacks, the physical symptoms, the nightmares, the unexplainable fear of hospitals, sirens, the color blue, anything related to nuclear energy or Russia. Have you ever been to Russia? She asked. Never. Never even been to Europe. Have you studied Russian history, nuclear physics? No, I actively avoided it. It triggers me. She made notes. Cindy, I want to be clear about something. Past life regression is a therapeutic tool. Whether the memories that emerge are actual past lives or symbolic representations created by your subconscious doesn't really matter. What matters is whether it helps you heal. Are you comfortable with that? I'm comfortable with anything that might help, I said honestly. I don't believe in past lives, but I don't believe in living like this for the rest of my life either. Our second session was the first attempt at regression. Dr. Morrison had me lie back in a comfortable chair. She guided me through a deep relaxation exercise. Her voice was calm, steady, hypnotic. She asked me to go back, before this life, to find the source of my fear. At first, nothing happened. I felt relaxed but aware. Then, images started coming. Flashes, like an old film projector. Gray buildings. Cyrillic letters on signs I somehow could read. A river. A city I'd never visited but somehow knew was called Pripyat. An apartment building. A small apartment. A window overlooking the street. Describe what you're seeing, drive. Morrison's voice came from far away. I'm in an apartment. It's small but nice. There's a couch, a small TV, books on shelves, photos on the wall. I can see my face in a mirror, but it's not my face. It's someone else, but it's also me. What's your name? Svetlana Petrova. I came out of that first session shaking. Dr. Morrison gave me water, made me sit for a while before I could drive home. She suggested we take it slow, work through this carefully. Over the next 3 months, I went to her office twice a week. Each session went deeper. The memories weren't all at once. They came in pieces, like assembling a puzzle. A scene here, a moment there. Gradually, a life took shape. I was born Svetlana Petrova in Kyiv in 1958. My father was a factory supervisor. My mother was a school teacher. I was good at mathematics, exceptional at it. In Soviet times, if you were smart and from a working-class family, education was your path up. I studied hard, got accepted to Moscow State University at 17 to study nuclear physics. The university years came back in vivid detail. Walking through Moscow in winter, snow crunching under my boots. Studying in the library until they kicked us out at midnight. Meeting other students who believed, like I did, that we were building the future. Nuclear energy was going to power the Soviet Union into a new era. We were the generation that would make it happen. I graduated with honors in 1980. Got assigned to work at the V.I. Lenin nuclear power plant near a place called Pripyat. I was so proud. One of the few women engineers at the facility. I moved to Pripyat in 1982. It was a new city, built specifically for the plant workers and their families. Everything was modern, clean, optimistic. We had a cinema, a cultural center, restaurants. They were building an amusement park with a Ferris wheel that was supposed to open on May Day, 1986. I remember my apartment on Lenina Avenue, 4th floor. I could see the plant's cooling towers from my window. Some people thought that was creepy. I thought it was beautiful, evidence of progress, of human achievement. In session after session, more details emerged. I remembered my supervisor, Anatoly Dyatlov. Brilliant but harsh. Demanding. He pushed everyone hard. I remembered my colleagues. Victor, who always brought chocolates on Fridays. Olga, the only other woman in our department, who became like a sister to me. I remembered the control room, every button and switch and screen. And I remembered Dmitry. He was a construction engineer working on Reactor 5, which was being built. We met at a workers' social event in 1983. He asked me to dance. He was handsome, kind, patient with my obsession with work. We dated for 2 years, got engaged in 1985, planned to marry in June 1986. I remember picking out our wedding rings, simple gold bands we saved for months to buy. Dr. Morrison recorded all of this. She had me describe details, dates, names, places, specific events. She was testing whether these were real memories or fantasy. I described the layout of the control room, the sequence of switches for the emergency cooling system, the exact location of the dosimetry equipment. Details I shouldn't know. Then came the sessions about April 1986. Those were the hardest. Dr. Morrison had to bring me out of hypnosis twice because I was hyperventilating. But I needed to know, needed to remember. April 25th, 1986. I was scheduled for the night shift starting at 11 p.m. We were running a safety test on Reactor 4. It was supposed to be routine, testing whether the reactor could handle a power loss and restart safely. We'd done similar tests before. I remember getting dressed for work that evening, putting on my white engineer's coat. Dmitry was there. We'd spent the afternoon together. He was worried about something, though he wouldn't tell me what. He kissed me goodbye and told me to be safe. I laughed. "It's just a safety test," I told him. "I'll be home before you wake up." Those were the last words I ever said to him. I arrived at the plant at 10:45 p.m., checked in at security, walked to the control room. It was quiet. The night shift crew was assembling. Dyatlov was already there, tense. The test had been delayed. Moscow was pushing for results. There was pressure, always pressure from above. By midnight, we were preparing for the test. The reactor power needed to be reduced gradually. But things weren't going as planned. The power dropped too fast. It fell to nearly zero. Dyatlov was furious. We had to stabilize it, bring it back up to test levels. This is where it started going wrong. We were manually overriding safety systems, pulling out control rods to increase power. The reactor was becoming unstable. Some of the younger operators were nervous. I was nervous. The readings didn't look right. At 1 a.m. on April 26th, I suggested we abort the test. Dyatlov overruled me. "Comrade Petrova," he said coldly, "we will complete this test. That is an order." At 1:23 a.m., we initiated the test sequence. For a few seconds, it seemed to be working. Then the power started surging. Fast. Too fast. Warning lights blazed across all the control panels. The reactor temperature was spiking beyond any safe level. "Emergency shutdown," someone shouted. We hit the AZ5 button, the emergency shutdown. It was supposed to stop the reaction by inserting all the control rods at once. Instead, it caused an explosion. The physics of it, I understood even in that moment. The design flaw nobody had anticipated. The control rods had graphite tips. When they inserted into an already unstable reactor, instead of slowing the reaction, they briefly accelerated it. The power surge was instant and catastrophic. The first explosion shook the entire building. Equipment flew off the walls, people were thrown to the floor, glass shattered. Then came the second explosion, bigger. The roof ripped off. The 1,000-ton concrete lid covering the reactor was blown off like a bottle cap. The reactor core was exposed to the night sky. Through the observation window, I could see it. The blue glow. Cherenkov radiation. It's what happens when particles move through water faster than light can travel through water. It's one of the most beautiful things in physics. And one of the most deadly. Seeing that glow with your naked eyes means you're absorbing a lethal dose of radiation. I tasted metal immediately. Metallic taste is one of the first symptoms of radiation exposure. My skin started tingling, then burning. Not from heat. From radiation destroying my cells at the molecular level. The control room dissolved into chaos. Alarms, screaming, people shouting, some running, some frozen in shock. I tried to help evacuate the room, but my legs weren't working right. I felt dizzy, disoriented. The radiation was already affecting my nervous system. Outside, through the broken windows, I could see firefighters arriving. They had no idea what they were responding to. Nobody told them it was a nuclear accident. They thought it was just a fire. They parked their trucks and started running toward the burning reactor. I wanted to scream at them to run away, but I couldn't find my voice. One firefighter was so young. Maybe 23, 24 years old. I watched him look up at the blue glow with wonder, like he was seeing the northern lights. He climbed up onto the roof where the reactor was exposed and started spraying water on it. He would be dead in less than 2 weeks. He didn't know that every second near that exposed core was killing him. I collapsed in the control room about 30 minutes after the explosion. My colleagues tried to help me, but everyone who'd been in that room was already dead. We just didn't know it yet. The radiation dose we'd absorbed was fatal. Not immediately, but inevitably. Our cells were destroyed. Our immune systems were gone. We were dead people walking. They took us to Pripyat Medical Hospital first. The doctors and nurses there were brave, but they had no experience with acute radiation syndrome. They didn't have proper equipment. They didn't even have iodine tablets. Within hours, our symptoms became severe. Hair falling out in clumps, skin turning red and blistering, vomiting that wouldn't stop, internal bleeding. The smell of our bodies beginning to decompose while we were still alive. On April 27th, they evacuated Pripyat, 50,000 people, told to pack a bag for 3 days. They said they'd be back soon. They never came back. The city is still abandoned today, frozen in time. The Ferris wheel I wanted to ride never opened. It sits there still, rusting, in an empty amusement park where children will never play. Those of us who were critically exposed were flown to Moscow on April 27th. Hospital number 6. They had a special radiation ward. The doctors and nurses there wore protective suits. They knew what they were dealing with. They also knew most of us wouldn't survive. Dr. Morrison had to stop the session there. I was crying too hard to continue. But I needed to finish, needed to remember all of it. The next session, I went back to hospital number 6. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though that was excruciating. It was the isolation. We were so radioactive we couldn't be touched. Dmitri came to Moscow. I could see him through the glass of my isolation room. He stood there crying, and I couldn't even hold his hand. My mother came too. She pressed her hand against the glass, and I pressed mine on the other side, and we both knew I was dying. The radiation had destroyed my bone marrow. My body couldn't make new blood cells. My organs were failing. My skin was falling off. The doctors tried everything. Blood transfusions, antibiotics. Nothing helped. The radiation had damaged my DNA. My body couldn't heal. I died on May 11th, 1986. 15 days after the explosion, I was 28 years old. I should have married Dmitri in June. I should have had children. I should have grown old. Instead, they buried me in a lead-lined coffin. My body was so contaminated with radiation it was classified as nuclear waste. Closed casket funeral. My mother never got to see my face one last time. They buried me in a Moscow cemetery in a special section for Chernobyl victims. When Dr. Morrison brought me out of that final session, I couldn't stop crying for hours. She sat with me, gave me water, let me process. It all made sense now. Every fear, every symptom, every nightmare. The blue light, the hospitals, the metallic taste, the panic around medical equipment, the fear of sirens. I had died of acute radiation syndrome, and somehow my soul remembered. Now comes the hard part, Dr. Morrison said. We need to verify this. We need to see if Svetlana Petrova was real. I spent the next 2 weeks researching. The internet has extensive documentation of Chernobyl, lists of victims, memorials, archives, and I found her. Svetlana Petrova. Born 1958 in Kiev. Nuclear engineer at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Died May 11th, 1986, in Moscow Hospital number 6 from acute radiation syndrome following the Reactor 4 accident. She was real. I found a photograph in a Ukrainian memorial archive. A young woman in a white engineering coat standing in front of the reactor building with 3 other engineers. Dark hair pulled back. Serious expression. A small smile. And when I saw her face, I felt like I was looking at an old photograph of myself. Not physically similar, but energetically, spiritually. I knew that face. The details I described under hypnosis matched historical records. The control room layout, the failed safety test, Dyatlov's insistence on continuing despite warnings, the AZ5 button causing the explosion instead of preventing it, the blue Cherenkov light, the firefighters who didn't know they were dealing with radiation. Hospital number 6. All of it documented. I described things I couldn't have known. Technical details of the reactor design. The names of people I'd worked with. The exact sequence of events that night. I'd never studied Chernobyl. I'd actively avoided any information about it because it triggered my panic attacks. Yet I knew details that only someone who was there could know. I contacted the Chernobyl Museum in Kyiv through email. I told them I was researching Svetlana Petrova for a project. They responded within a week. Confirmed that her name is listed on the memorial wall of plant workers who died from the accident. They said few people remembered the individual engineers. Most attention went to the firefighters and first responders. But Svetlana was one of 31 people who died in the immediate aftermath. The museum director mentioned that Svetlana's fiancé, Dmitry Volkov, was still alive. Still living in Kyiv. He visited the memorial every year on April 26th. She asked if I wanted his contact information. I said yes, then spent 3 days terrified to use it. Finally, I wrote him a letter. In English, which I had to have translated to Russian. I didn't tell him about the past life memories immediately. I just said I was researching Svetlana's story, that I wanted to honor her memory, that I would appreciate anything he could tell me about her. He called me 3 weeks later. The museum had given him my number. His English was better than my Russian. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about Svetlana, about how they met, how she loved classical music, especially Tchaikovsky, how she was terrible at cooking but insisted on trying anyway, how she always wore a small silver cross her grandmother gave her, even though religion was discouraged in Soviet times, how she had a laugh that could fill a room, how she died before he could tell her one last time that he loved her. Everything he described, I'd remembered. The silver cross, the classical music, the attempted cooking disasters. Details I'd told Dr. Morrison in regression sessions before I'd ever contacted the museum, before I knew Dmitry existed. Finally, I told him about my experiences, about the panic attacks I'd had since childhood, about the regression therapy, about remembering being Svetlana, about dying in hospital number 6. There was a long silence on the phone. I thought he'd hung up. Then I heard him crying. She used to say she wanted to help build a better future. His voice cracked. She believed the plant was safe. She died trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. She blamed herself at the end, kept saying she should have stopped the test. But Dyatlov wouldn't listen to her. If you are her, if her soul found a new life, I'm glad. I'm glad she got another chance. I hope this life is kinder to her. I'm still in therapy with Dr. Morrison. Not for regression anymore. For integration. For learning how to live with these memories. Understanding that I am both Cindy and Svetlana. 2 lives. 2 experiences. 1 soul. My physical symptoms haven't completely disappeared. I still have bad days. But I understand them now. They're not random. They're echoes. Cellular memories of trauma, so profound, it carried over into this lifetime. Some researchers call it epigenetic memory. Some call it past life trauma. Some dismiss it entirely. I don't know what the scientific explanation is. I just know it's real for me. I can watch documentaries about Chernobyl now. It's hard, but I can do it. I've even started learning Russian, which comes surprisingly easily. Words I've never studied feel familiar in my mouth. In April 2024, I traveled to Ukraine. I visited the exclusion zone with an official tour group, stood outside the Pripyat hospital where Svetlana was first taken, walked through the abandoned city she loved, saw the Ferris wheel that never opened, now rusting and covered in moss. The tour guide took us as close to the reactor as we're allowed. It's covered now by a massive steel dome called the New Safe Confinement, built to contain the radiation for the next 100 years. I stood there looking at it, and I felt closure. I visited the memorial wall at the Chernobyl Museum, found Svetlana's name engraved in stone. Svetlana Petrova, 1958 to 1986. I placed flowers there. White roses. I don't know why white roses. It just felt right. Dmitry met me at the museum. He's 71 now, silver-haired, still tall and handsome. We sat in a cafe and talked for hours. He showed me photos of Svetlana I'd never seen. And I told him things about her that only she would have known. Private jokes, moments they'd shared. He stopped being skeptical after the first 10 minutes. "You have her eyes," he said finally. "Not the color, not the shape, but the way you look at things. She's in there. I can see her." I'm sharing this story because I know I'm not alone. There are people out there with unexplained fears, mysterious symptoms that doctors can't diagnose, recurring nightmares that don't match anything in their current lives, phobias that make no logical sense. Maybe you're one of them. I'm not here to convince you that past lives are real. I can only tell you what I experienced, what I discovered, what I know to be true for me. For 32 years, I lived in fear of something I couldn't name. Doctors said it was anxiety. Therapists said it was trauma with no source. I felt broken, defective, inexplicably damaged. Now I understand. Now I have context. And that understanding has brought healing. Svetlana Petrova died, trying to prevent a disaster she couldn't stop. She died, believing she had failed. But maybe, in some way, her story living on through me is its own kind of redemption. Maybe her truth needed to be told. The Chernobyl disaster affected hundreds of thousands of people. It poisoned land for generations. The exclusion zone will remain radioactive for thousands of years. But it also revealed incredible human courage. The plant workers who stayed to prevent further meltdowns, the firefighters who climbed onto that burning roof, the engineers who dove into radioactive water, the miners who dug beneath the reactor. They were all heroes. Many of them died. Svetlana was one of them. If you're watching this and you have unexplained fears or traumas, I encourage you to explore them, not necessarily through past life regression, but through any therapeutic method that resonates with you. Talk therapy, EMDR, hypnotherapy, whatever helps. Sometimes our deepest wounds have origins we can't immediately see. Sometimes healing requires looking beyond the obvious. The blue glow still appears in my dreams sometimes. But now when I see it, I don't wake up screaming. I wake up remembering. Remembering a woman who gave her life for her work. Remembering a sacrifice that mattered. Remembering a love that transcended death. I am Cindy Bruster, and I remember being Svetlana Petrova. And somehow, impossibly, beautifully, that makes me whole. If this story resonates with you, please share it. Leave a comment telling me about your own unexplained fears or memories. You're not crazy. You're not alone. Sometimes the past echoes louder than we realize. And sometimes understanding where we've been is the key to healing where we are. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting me honor Svetlana's memory. Thank you for being open to possibilities that science hasn't fully explained yet. May we all find our answers. May we all find our peace. And may the souls who were lost in Chernobyl never be forgotten.